Quote, labor is the only prayer that nature answers. It is the only prayer that deserves an answer. Good, honest, noble work. A quote by Robert G. Ingersoll. And this is key, as we've been talking about. It requires action to achieve what we want in this life. It requires work that a lot of people do not want to do. However, given the obligation, given the reasons behind the actions, given the effects of the good effects they see over time, and how valuable this could be, especially in a time of grief and of depression and so forth, that nature's answer could be a very valuable belief that to which we have actions that come from it as the real answer to the equation. Okay, because rather the answer is simply a question, and so what this quote is saying is that the labor is then the real answer to this, because that is the only prayer that nature answers to us. And so we ask of the questions, right? We ask the questions and nature answers. Typically, if we want to put labor and effort into that, we're going to receive more answers. It is the only prayer that deserves an answer, and it has to be real, good, honest, noble work, right? Objectively moral, good work that is in alignment with natural law, shall you want to receive what you desire. Quote, nature will never confront you with a problem you can't solve. You already have the answer, and that is why the question appears before you. A quote by Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. And this is what basically I just said, too, in affirming the previous quotes, that it will never confront you with a problem you can't solve. There's always a way, because there's always a reason behind everything, right? It's cause and effect. It's natural law. So it says you already have the answer. You already have natural law. You already have the truth. You don't have to go off seeking it. You just have to put work and effort into being it, into doing it. And that's the thing, is we're going to talk a lot about being as we move forward here. And that's why it says the question appears before you. So do you ask that question to seek the answer? Do you know which path to go? Because that's what I'm asking you. You know, I'm asking you this question so you can question, so that more can question, and then it's just a domino effect of questioning, and therefore we're getting answers because we're actually questioning for those answers. We're not just giving answers. We're not saying here's a free answer, here's a free answer, because that's the very problem, is the fact that, yeah, one drug as one answer does not work for everybody. One diet as one answer does not work for everybody. So nature's answer is actually an answer that can work for everybody, but it still poses a question to ask more questions so we can get all the answers that are existent within nature. Quote, man's heart away from nature becomes hard, a quote by Standing Bear. Don't know who that is, but it says here that man's heart away from nature becomes hard. This is symbolizing the right brain, having that right brain part of us, that holistic health part of us that has more compassion, more care, more connection, wanting to connect rather than divide, rather than be too authoritative. You're being supportive, so your heart is opening up more. Okay? So man's heart away from nature. So let's say, okay, let's apply this quote differently. Man's heart with technology, man's heart with government becomes hard. Yeah, because, oh my gosh, now you're in a position of power, ruling over other human beings, and you feel like you have that moral obligation to rule over other people and give the people what they want. So your heart becomes hard because you don't want to face criticism. You don't want people pushing you down. You know that you can help humanity as a politician, you know, even though through that very process you become naturally denatured. And we know this because you're not in alignment with natural law and you're seeking already man's law. So this is a very troubling situation for people who are of that stature, where if they seek to escape and soften up their heart a little bit more, they'll be open to their families, but open to their families completely, open to their lives completely, not just of that of ruling over other people, which, for the record, I mean, there's still among the masses of people who are just following orders. There's still people at the very, very top behind the scenes. quote, "Nature is a mutable cloud which is always and never the same." A quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, always going back to him because we see how much he talks about it. And this quote is perfectly representing this polarity, this irony that we've been talking about, this absolute change in the universe that is natural, but also the two different ways to look at it, the many different perspectives, which gives us those many different experiences, shall we want to understand why things come about. There's a key here, right? Even, we talked about newspapers and how reading the mainstream news or having mainstream, conventional, very propagated in deep depths of denaturement, that is where it's not going to help you in this real life, in this reality. It's just going to distract you, if anything, and it's going to keep you in a state of fear. So, I want to say that no news is actually the best news. We see that nature is already the best teacher, so that's probably where you should get most of your news from if somebody were to ask me. And then also this idea that no means no. Yes, it's like if somebody says no, you leave them alone, right? It's no means no. Well, the same thing applies to the truth. I mean, the truth is the truth, and wrong is the wrong. There's this idea here that, yes, there is an objective wrong and there's an objective right. Now, there's another note I have here talking about controversial people. They don't want to show their worth. They don't want to show that they're worthy of helping people. Take, for example, you look at billionaires. I don't want to name too many names here, but take a look at certain billionaires who have a lot of influence. They have a lot of controversy online from a lot of other people. It's often because they haven't given themselves up to this transparency that they could have been. If they were more transparent about their life, they wouldn't have this controversy. I mean, is this not common sense? Just knowing that people will not be as controversial about you if you simply just are on the record speaking to everybody and about everybody. Like, this is key here. It's just being open to your own very fan base. And YouTubers sometimes make the mistake of not listening to their own fan base too. Different content creators, I shouldn't even say YouTubers, they're censoring people there. So we have a big problem on our hands, and controversial people, you just have to look at it like, okay, why is it that they're controversial? If anything, that could be a good thing. It's like, okay, let's look at the controversial movie. Let's look at the controversial person, because perhaps they don't want you to see something there. Okay, but it also could be a psyop. It could be a controlled opposition. So be aware of that. Be aware of the many sides and angles, as I've been saying. Then I also have here in my notes, embrace the bad that you need to accept, right? Like, for example, one of the most harsh realities that we sometimes have to face is death. This idea that, somebody passes on, even though, their spirit still remains and much of their life still remains in memory, as much as everything is. But we have to learn to accept and live with that reality, as bad as it may be. We have to live presently to keep our emotions intact, keep our mind intact, which, as you know, is really key toward everything that we create in this world thereafter. So if we don't want to be in a cycle where we're basically lacking control, this is all about self-control. If we have self-control, we have more freedom, believe it or not, as long as we're not trying to control other human beings. And therefore, we can also overcome bad situations such as death. We can embrace the bad and say, we can mourn and so forth, but we're not going to let it control our lives and bring us to deaths ourselves. That is dangerous, okay? And so then there's this other idea that I have written down: the truth is out there. When people say the truth is out there, yeah, it's also present. We know that the truth is here, it's everywhere, it's present. But also, when you think of it in the other context, as the truth is out there, perhaps it's so far to some people that they just think it's so far, even though it's right near them, but it's so far out of their mindset, this prison of a mind that they built for themselves, this illusion of a boundary that they have in their mind, that it's so out there, it's hard for them to achieve it. It's hard for them to grasp, even though it's right here, ironically. So there's just the irony at play again. So we have this quote, nature and books belong to the eyes that see them. A quote by Waldo Emerson saying that if you attract nature, you want natural medicine, you want natural law manifesting in your life as it should, by the way, you will have that as your belonging. It will work with you, right? It's like if you seek a book, you seek to read a book to learn something, you must seek to learn that, to open that book and understand the aspects in the book. And the book could help you only once you seek to learn from the book, only once you open it up and actually read the text. So the eyes, which he's also putting here in this quote, also represents perception. So whatever you're looking at, whatever is your world view, is going to be the actions that you take, as your world action steps. If you see the beauty and you see the truth, it's going to belong with you because you see it, you're open to it, and you're willing to look into it. And that's the difference between many people. And that's why that quote is so specific on, well, if you seek that nature is the answer, there you go, that's a tool within itself. Is your eyes and your mind is open to it. You're open to the ideas. You're open to the ideas of many individuals within the movement. Try you want to look at it as a movement point of view. You're open to the many possibilities, and you're open to learning about natural law. You're open to learning about all the different knowledge and education everybody can share with one another. Okay, so hear this. Quote, to speak truly, few adult persons can see nature. Most persons do not see the sun, at least they have a very superficial seeing. The sun illuminates only the eye of the man, but shines into the eye and heart of the child. The lover of nature is he whose inward and outward senses are still truly adjusted to each other, who has retained the spirit of infancy even into the era of manhood. A quote by Waldo Emerson. So to keep and protect everything that we have. Health is not just freedom, it's also protection, because we are born and built to have this blueprint for healing, and it's just up to us to use it. And we have this amazing youth, and it's just up to us to protect it, right? It's like, what's an anti-aging substance that you find in nature? What does that mean, anti-aging? It's protective. It's pro-protective. It's it's antioxidant, anti-oxidation. So it's protecting you from oxidation. It's protecting you from aging. So a lot of it is protecting, right? If you want to talk about preventing medicine, which our healthcare models don't always do, really doesn't even focus at it at all. They say, oh, we're treating this many people more than ever as an accomplishment, but that means more people are sick more than ever because they have a treatment-based model so they can keep getting money. It's a business model, essentially, not really a healthcare model. The healthcare, again, is just all about money. So prevention is this protection that we have. And community, having one another, friends and family, is our immunity, shall you see. Because if we're literally protecting one another and, I got your back, you got my back, that's literally protecting one another to where, yes, protecting is prevention. We're preventing bad things from happening by getting together as humanity, as a community, as a movement to speak up for something that we truly believe in and truly is to believe in, right? This is not something that we're pushing upon anyone. This is simply seeing the sun, as he says in this quote, not superficial seeing. It's simply just opening up our eyes and seeing the right sun, seeing the right source of energy. I mean, you can look at gas stations, they all use this symbolism of the sun to make it look like, you're dependent on them for your source of life, essentially. You got a lot of hidden symbolism there to kind of like tap into your subconscious to make you want to buy things and use their products as if a sense of dependence, like the government and like technology. So gas stations do the same thing, credit card companies do the same thing, and it makes sense, right? So they want you to see their sun, their version of a denatured reality, and not the real nature, not the real reality that you can see simply with your eyes in everyday life. People don't see, but this deception is everywhere, and it's gotten to the point where, if you just open your eyes, it's like, it's just bombarding. It's just constant, right? But as an individual, you just have a good mindset, then you can move past it. That's fine. But in a way that's also bad, because if you don't speak up about it, then nobody else will see it when they need to. So you have this irony to the universe on all the different sides, depending on how you look at it. And then this quote then says, the sun illuminates only the eye of the man, but shines into the eye and heart of a child, saying that there's this greater heart in a child. They have more, not just more imagination and creativity that we've been talking about is really essential, but they are more in touch with God. You say, maybe a child is more in touch with God or the universe or in nature because they are closer to birth, right? And you see they have perfect skin, they have a perfect environment, usually shouldn't grow up immediately of having disease. It's usually when you reach adulthood that you have more problems, right? Wouldn't that be more natural to happen? So the child is this amazing thing, which is why the elites feed on children so much. Not to TMI or anything, but they really feed on them, and they use organ replacements and so forth so they can keep themselves younger, and they just absolutely feed on them because they desire them, their youth. They're jealous of this perfect being of nature. This is how much they're at war with nature. It truly is. And then he says, the lover of nature is he whose inward and outward senses are truly adjusted to each other. So those of which are aligned with nature, essentially being aligned with one another. So it's like saying left and right brain being together, because they're supposed to be together, right? That is your brain, is having the left and the right. But which one are you using? So that's what he's saying here. It's like, are you having both present at the same time, both out of balance, both out of harmony, or are they diametrically opposed? Are they not with one another in workings of within one another? Then he says, who has retained the spirit of infancy even to the era of manhood, saying that to keep your youth, to keep that creativity, to keep that imagination, to keep that desire, that passion, that wanting to learn more knowledge, it's keeping this nature basically within us, that loving, very holistic, mother-like nature within us, and especially within men. Men could be very driven out of their connectiveness to themselves because they have this left brain tendency, and they've been at rule of many civilizations of the past. Many of them are still at the top of the pyramid and stuff, so you just have to keep in mind how things are going. Women or men both have feminine and masculine qualities, but you have to understand who's been in power more, who tends to get, more angry, and because, who has that natural strength. It could be typically men. So I'm not blaming men here. There's a lot of problems with women too, for sure. But all of humanity is being denatured in such a way where they just cannot feel themselves. They are desensitized, and they're being desensitized by many different ways. It's not just Hollywood showing you gore and blood on TV and showing subliminal messages in your face. It's also, the pornographic content and all the stuff that they throw at you on the media and online. It's essentially just everything on technology. I'm telling you that they're using that as a weapon, as a second government to help control you. And this time, not just control you willfully, but to control you by denaturing, controlling you by dumbing you down. Quote, in the presence of nature, a wild delight runs through the man, in spite of real sorrows, a quote by Waldo Emerson, saying that having the presence of nature always nearby and with you is therefore a wild delight that runs through the man. So it's this spirit that is given to him in spite of real sorrows. So there could be bad things present, but guess what? Nature's there to heal. The best physician, always there with you to provide and be there as intended. And so it's no wonder why Ralph Waldo Emerson also spoke of self-reliance, which goes very well among the idea of self-governance, self-sustainability, everything just controlling the self to transcend to the world about, and being able to do that, right? And how do you do that? It's by seeking nature. He found out for himself as I did and many other people have come to terms with, if you were to bring especially all these ideas together, it starts to become even more apparent. So maybe we're a few individuals actually, but I feel like we can be a lot more, given we bring these ideas out there. So he says, quote, "To talk of reliance is a poor external way of speaking. Speak rather of that which relies," which is a really good way to sum up the term self-reliance. What does this life rely on? Does it rely on nutrition? Does it rely on having life be in living beings? Having life manifest for life? Is it that nature is supposed to be of this domain and not controlled by forces that are denatured? This should be common sense once you start thinking about it, being that we talked about common sense. But that of which relies. So what are you relying on, right? Are you relying on the government? Then you're not self-reliant. That's what he's saying. See, the talk of reliance he's saying is external. It's not internal. He's bringing the focus back to you. Who are you relying on? What is this relying on that? What's going on here? Is there a dependence? Is there a condition that which requires another thing? And we talk a lot about requirements when it comes to natural law, right? What is required of this condition? So there's certain things that rely on another thing. And you can very well rely on people who you meet if you trust them, if you create this obligation where you guys can create things together. There's an amazing relationship between humanity, including that of which is within themselves. If they have a good relationship with their own body, well, what do you think they're going to rely on? Are they going to rely on the drug companies when they realize that they're so self-reliant on their own body to heal, and that they realize they have all these tools in their house, like baking soda and apple cider vinegar and coconut oil, to do pretty much anything they need? I mean, just an example, for example. And then going back to this idea of action and effort that it takes to create the change that we want. And again, it's not like you're the only one. You can have other people doing it. Once you start and you get other people to do it, then it's like a continuous inspiration and motivation because other people are doing it now. So it feels like it creates more of an obligation for you to go out and keep doing it. Like, this is the point, is you can structure your life around the goals that you have, whether it is weight loss or not. It doesn't matter what it is. So you have this quote, "Always do what you are afraid to do." So do what you may not want to do. And this is the point here. This is a quote by Waldo Emerson, especially if you know that it's right and that it's intended for you, is to do and take that risk. This is the best time, more than ever, if I'm telling you, and this is what we see from all the evidence that we can compile between all these documentaries and presentations and quotes and philosophers and just innate truths. If this is the best time to take action, then I have to ask you, what is stopping you? I'm presenting a blueprint to help you. I'm here to show you that I'm doing it too. And then you have all these other people, independent journalists, independent media, people making videos trying to wake people up. What is the purpose of waking people up? What's the purpose of informing people? It's because they all want the same end goal, essentially, that all of us want, is just to live free from these influences that don't belong in our lives, and to hold them accountable so that they do the right thing if they are to rule over us, which truly they're not at the end of the day if we are to have this conversation. And a lot of them also understand that because they've done the research for themselves. They've looked into it. They're not ignorant, right? They've seen into it, and that allowed them to open themselves up to the truth. So are you going to open yourself up to action? Because then action will start manifesting within this life. But we have to open up ourselves to it. We have to start doing it. Otherwise, we won't get the desired result that we want. So if you are the strong promoter of gun rights and freedom of speech and so forth, well, this is the perfect action to take then, okay? By working with nature, you can have all the gun rights in the world that you want, all the freedom to speak in the world that you want. And this is the perfect solution to do so, is how do we integrate and unite the world? It's with the most universal principle known to man, which I'm saying is nature. Right, so we have this quote, we are by nature observers and thereby learners. That is our permanent state, a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. Again, reinforcing these past quotes that talked about how do we learn, and the best teacher is by nature, and the best teacher, best doctor, all this. We learn from it. We learn from the natural laws, the whole point of teaching it. And this is the idea, is that we observe, we're open to it before we take action. So we are just observers, right? And from simply changing our minds, we can change our actions. So I'm not asking much of people. Now, while I am saying, okay, talk to your neighbors and talk to people you know, it's only because we need to initiate it, and we need it in circulation. And once it's in the minds of people, because it's going to be through talking, it's going to be through having conversations, then it's not that hard, really. It's not like I'm telling you, okay, let's go protest here, let's bring all the flags and stuff like here. No, we're not doing that. And maybe there will be a time and place for everything, I'm sure, but no, like this ultimate solution is mostly, if anything, only just talking to one another and being open to doing that. And that includes you being open to initiating that conversation. So he's saying that's our permanent state. Once we do so, we will like it. And being that we are always observers, because like we're always reacting to our environment. Now maybe you aren't aware of certain things, especially if you've been denatured to some extent. It's like, oh, you're not aware of your environment at all, but your subconscious is still taking it in. Your body's still aware. It's like saying, okay, well, when you're sleeping, your body is still actually aware of your environment for the most part, right? You can get distracted from something. And so your body knows best, and nature often knows best. So we're just learning here. This is an experiment. This is a test trial, and we need to learn. This is the test for humanity. It's by nature, but there's also a lot of tests that we've given ourselves, like these economic collapses that are surely coming if we stay within this government system, and these other dependencies. And you see, like, okay, mandatory masks and stuff for viruses. These are all just tests to show us for what's to come, what's bigger coming, because there's always this bigger potential that is likely happening, especially if the root cause to the disease is not addressed, and it isn't. The root cause to the disease is government, okay? So we can test ourselves now by simply observing the patterns of government in all these quotes, and we can learn from this because we are experimenting, because we are testing ourselves. We're giving ourselves this challenge, and then from that we can innovate. So this is our permanent state because we're all doing it, whether we like so or not. You can be the most closed-minded person in the world, but you'll still be observant, and you probably just won't learn a lot because you're not open to receiving that information, but you're still observant. So it's just a matter of you deciding, are you open to that information or not, and if you're willing to go on with that. For who even sums this up even more, you have again, quote, nothing can bring you peace but yourself, a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. So when you see all these governments saying, well, let's bring peace here, let's just, world peace, oh, well, we're going to war so we can bring people to peace. Nope. That's not where peace is found. Peace is found within yourself. Living, like we said, with the good and the bad environments. Not too bad of an environment, but learning to live with what we have regardless, and being at peace with ourselves, which we very well can do, especially among nature where there's less distraction, and you can do a lot more breathing exercises, and where you can look outside and you realize that there's this natural peace to the universe that exists, and it's perfectly fine, and humans are the one that's honestly destroying it half the time. So you realize this, and you're like, okay, well, if humans are the problem, humans can also be a solution, because we can stop the problem. We can just stop doing what we're not supposed to be doing. And that's exactly what I'm presenting here. It's anything abstract. I mean, people can simply agree on the premises that we want to do good, and that we don't want influences controlling our lives. Simply that alone is enough. But if we really want to get down to the root cause, we do have to identify an enemy, and we have to identify objective moral behavior and objective wrong, especially in a world where people will argue over every little term and every little thing, even though again, it's just often a distraction. Find yourself at peace, and you won't think about every little thing in such a way that it's just too much. Like, trust me, I like to look at details because I'm into science and health, but there comes a point where you realize all those details doesn't help this greater cause. It doesn't help the root cause. So it doesn't help either one, because it's this imbalance that you're creating. And nature is this simple but complex thing, where you can have this simple mindset or you can have the super complex mindset of it. It's ultimately up to you. So just realize that, so you don't get trapped. And so that way you're able to shift, and you're able to have control over your mind, which, as you know, is going to be a key factor in bringing you peace. And we're going to talk more about that. But then even Ralph Waldo Emerson says, I mean, this cannot be any more accurate. Quote, lose yourself in nature and find peace. So he's saying literally that you go to nature, you'll find peace. And we saw from the last quote, you know, is about how we can't live in peace unless we start with ourselves. Living in nature and self-sustainable and for ourselves, this doesn't sound like any equation which government fits in. Exactly, because government promotes war, and they are a negative expression of natural law innately. Quote, respect the child. Wait and see the new product of nature. Nature loves analogies, but not repetitions. Respect the child. Be not too much his parent. Trespass not on his solitude. A quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson saying that even the child has a level of self that must be respected for each consciousness, right? And you see this, again, emphasis on the child, this really important stage of life, this construction zone for essentially all your organs and all your systems within the body. So it says, wait and see the new product of nature. It doesn't say, pump with 100 vaccines and interject here, and no, it doesn't say that. It says wait and see the new product of nature, because each new child and each new birth is actually something we should highly respect, and something that we should adore, and something that we should treasure. We shouldn't be treasuring abortion, we should be treasuring this beautiful creation we have here. Okay, so regardless of what you think on that, again, I mean, this is just innate truths I'm telling you. It's nothing more, frankly, is just understanding this product of nature is the child. I mean, could anybody deny that? Even other animals, other species have the same deal, because reproduction is part of our nature. And it says that nature loves analogies, so different comparisons and stuff like that, but not repetitions. And perhaps I would leave that so you can interpret what that means. But not repetitions, it's saying, you know, there is no same thing. There's no exact same thing. You respect the child, you know, it's like a product of nature. Respect the child. It's like a unique form being is kind of what I'm getting from this quote when he says not repetitions, but analogies. Is like there's similarities, but there's no exact same being. And this is the beauty of, again, everybody puzzling and giving their piece to the puzzle, everyone contributing to the cause. And this idea that everybody must contribute to the cause is something that is quite essential. But as long as people don't have this belief in statism, I mean, most of everything is fixed simply by that. And if people don't want to take action within their own lives, it's up to them. It's their own demise. Because then karma may not work out in their favor. They may receive bad things because they're not doing enough good things. Like, you let things happen sometimes naturally in nature. You don't always be the one to step in and say, whoa, 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 this is what must happen. Sometimes it's better off to just leave it to nature, as long as we understand this current that is going on. You know, you want to use water or a stream as representing of this. Again, you can do so much with poetry here. And it says, be not too much as parents, so don't rule over the child too much. You know, you have to have a safe level of this balance between, you know, you being authoritative and you being supportive, especially with your own child. Okay, we're not talking about a government. You know, because you're definitely not the child of a government. You don't even know those people. but they do act like it, right? Where they want to be your parent and always watch you and so forth. Just, something to keep in mind. And then meanwhile, a lot of parents are not parenting their children, which is why we see a lot of problems arising, and then more ideas coming to those children who are in bad situations. See, it's not that subliminal messages are bad for individuals, but that it's bad for individuals who are already in the bad mindset. Because as we know, the mindset is a very powerful thing. So this mindset, if it's tapped into by these other influences, they're more likely to be more vulnerable than other people. Right? Somebody can watch American Horror Story and feel perfectly fine because they have a great environment around them. So they're not going to be influenced as much. I'm going to say as much because I don't know how it's influencing them, and I don't know their life completely, right? But somebody who is in a bad state of mind, and we can say objectively, is like, okay, they're not with their parents, they're not with their family, they're doing drugs and so forth. They can probably be more vulnerable to the problems that are persisting in their face. Okay, now let's say you are of that stature. That's fine. That's perfectly fine. We're here to support one another. Like, that's okay. Like, our job is actually to fix the problem, so that's okay. Recognizing a problem is actually good, so we can move in the direction of good and learn from the past, and then you can share your stories with those who struggled with it. So it's like this is a learning process for everybody. It's not limited to any few people. And that's the beauty of this, is it's not just limited to a few people, it never is. And that's what makes this movement also very different, is the fact that we're open to every individual and want to appeal to every individual because we all live within the same nature. It says, trespass not on his solitude. Don't trespass too much on his personal character. A child is able to create. A child has all this creativity. Perhaps you may just help his nature in its works, just like we're supposed to help nature in its works, right? And not necessarily replace it or over dominate it. That's a really key here, and we see that often too within government, right? Is like it shouldn't overrule our lives. It should just help us in its works. But what really is it helping us in its work if its very nature is man's law, and it's dogmatic and it doesn't work over time? And it doesn't really raise anything. It's basically just a collection of something from the past that worked for one small point of time for a small majority of people, that doesn't really represent anything of nature itself, because nature is not being able to be represented when everybody's focused on that picture of a projection that is put onto them. So just understand that relationship between nature and government and child and parent. There's differences between all of those. You cannot say that a parent of a child is the same thing as a government over its people. And this is a book that I'd recommend if people want to learn more about nature, or the nature of nature, right? You can just keep saying nature, and I could keep putting it in every sentence too, and I'm sure it would work, right? But this is, again, this is a writing by Waldo Emerson. I suggest checking it out if you want to learn more. If you are somebody who likes to read. To recap, just on his book, he says here on nature and self-reliance, mainly, that's what he talks about. He says God is always near. He reveals himself everywhere and at all times in nature. He says in nature we are able to find, quote, the perpetual presence of the sublime. And he says in his presence we feel real delight in spite of sorrow, as we heard before. And it says nature gives us better, higher thoughts and emotions, affirming everything that we've been saying, and the fact that we can reach higher levels of consciousness, highest levels of knowledge, higher levels of enlightenment, which we need if we want to get out of bad situations, as we have learned. Then Debunking Scientism, he has this quote, nature hates calculators, by Waldo Emerson, not to be too scientism-like, and to have more of an open heart, open mind to that of which is simply in nature, not this science. Thank you for watching this video. Feel free to subscribe, like, and do whatever you wish. It's up to you. You are free in this life, and if you want to know how to change the world truly, please, I encourage you to check out my website, Endrulat. It's here for all of us, actually. It's not my website. It is my website, but it isn't. It's here for us all. We're all messengers. We're all fellow human beings. Let's change the world truly, and we can do it with Endrulat. Nature's the answer.